Welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us here today. Didn't let the open quite finish there. I recut the opens yesterday, and so my timing is off now just a little bit with YouTube and the whole thing. Glad to have you with us, though. Here it is, Shamrock up, Shamrock down day. It is our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football. But Jesse is back. It has been nearly 3 weeks since the one and only Jesse Steyers was on the show. Jesse, Shamrock up, Shamrock down, early married life.
Huge Shamrock up.
Well, that's good. No, you're not going to expand on that at all?
I would just say, the last 2 weeks, I've never felt just the overall amount of love, from friends, family, obviously Naomi, and then just how the wedding, went. And then the 2 weeks after, it was just, very, very sappy, but probably the best 2 weeks of my life. So I'm a big fan of the married life.
All right. How about transcontinental flights across the Atlantic Ocean? Shamrock up, Shamrock down.
On the way there, I'd be, I guess, Shamrock up because we got the first class and like the little pods that you could sleep in, and we laid down and did the overall, overnight flight. So I didn't sleep great, but at least I could sleep, and I could sleep comfortably. A big Shamrock down on the way back because we just, we're business class peasants on the way back, and there was a screaming baby, and we developed a little bit of a cold our last day in France, and so I just had this runny nose the entire time, and then my ears got plugged up, and so Shamrock down on the way back.
Which is worse? You had no Wi-Fi, I think, on the flight over, but the TVs on the back of the chairs weren't, like for your pick your movies and stuff like that on the way back. Which did you have a harder time doing without?
I think I want to say on the way back, I think it's completely inexcusable that you have an 8-hour flight and something like the Wi-Fi or the TVs aren't working.
Oh, man.
That's
brutal.
That's just brutal. On the way there, selfishly, like I wanted to watch football and maybe throw on like some of the Notre Dame games I missed and watch those, but that didn't happen. And on the way back, just everything didn't feel good. And so I was just trying to sleep as much as possible. I guess the only good thing is, they serve you a bunch of food. So like, at least that's good.
That's true. That's like the only place that you get meals now on flights. It used to be you'd get them if you flew like 2 hours. Now the only time I think you get a meal on a flight is if you're going overseas, basically. Maybe cross country. I don't know. I haven't been on a full like East Coast, West Coast, East Coast type flight. Maybe you get it there because that's a little bit longer, but otherwise, hey, enjoy your pretzels and your half a diet. Can I have more ice? All right.
I will say though, my favorite flight was when we left the Canary Islands and flew to Paris. We flew on this, like, I don't even know the brand. It was like basically, like a frontier of Europe, but the plane, I thought it was phenomenal. Like the seats were big, the seats were all green. That's what stuck out to me. But I just felt like there was extra room. I was comfortable. Like, I don't know if there's such thing as a cheap European flight, I guess is what I'm getting at, because it felt like I was very, very comfortable. And, at that point, we're halfway through the trip and it was only like a 2-3 hour flight. So, probably that had something to do with it. But I didn't mind it. The big green seat stuck out. Everyone's seat was like this.
Oh, that's right. I remember you sending us that photo of the big green seats. Now that you mention that, it's funny that the seats are bigger there because here in the States, the seats seem like they're getting smaller, even though Americans are getting larger. I don't
Correct.
Sure which, the fog's getting thicker. Okay. Well, you probably wouldn't even get that reference. It's from Airplane though. Let's get into some Notre Dame football. Shamrock up, Shamrock down. It's our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football. Jesse is back, so he gets to do it Trevor, I have to say, enjoyed doing Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. Vince has enjoyed doing Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down. Is it one of your favorite shows to do as well?
It is, but the people, I got some messages from some people that they were getting tired of dry old Vince. So
They were getting tired of Vince.
they said that they needed my energy back, and I said I get it. He's a get off your lawn type of guy.
Yeah, they need non-cheapskate energy, is what they need. And so they've got Jesse, who just did a European and African honeymoon. I want to start with Christian Gray, and this guy, maybe the most polarizing player on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish roster right now. I texted you about Christian Gray during the game the other day. I got crickets in terms of a response, so maybe that tells me where you sit on the Christian Gray debate. He got picked on a little bit. He got flagged for pass interference, but he also, of course, came up with a big interception. So what I want to do, second year in a row, big interception against Southern Cal, by the way. So here's a couple thoughts from Marcus Freeman on Christian Gray. I'm going to play this first on the interception. Marcus Freeman from after the game Saturday night. I'm going to give you my take on Christian Gray, and then I'll let you have the floor after that. So here is Marcus Freeman on the Christian Gray interception.
Deja vu. I mean, I kind of got on him the series that they scored right before we had that interception, and I reminded him, like, nobody feels bad, man. You got to do your job and play with the proper technique. Do I believe you can do it? Absolutely, but you got to go do it, and nobody has sympathy. And after that pick, he ran over. He said a couple words to me, but I like that, all right? I like that, and he knows I love him. I believe in him. He needed challenged a little bit. He's got to play with better technique. He has to, but keep battling, man. Keep battling, and you got to let the last play go. That's the game. That's the name of this game of football. You have to let the last play go and win this play. You have to win this play, and that's an example of what Christian did, and we got to continue to do that.
I love the critique of Christian Gray because you don't hear Marcus Freeman give, that kind of critique very often, and like the back and forth that they had before and after the interception. This to me, Jesse, is Christian Gray, though. Christian Gray is that friend who your mom's like, I don't know if I like you spending that much time around him. I heard from Jimmy's mom. She says that he's getting in trouble all the time. It's like blown coverage, pass interference, a little bit too handsy, too much stuff with the hands. It's always something. And Christian Gray, always stirring something up. But then the day comes, you go to his apartment and you're like, dude, I need your help. I can't tell you what it is. You can never ask me about it. We're going to hurt some people. And then the next thing you know, Christian Gray is like, whose cow are we going to take? And it's boom, interception just when you need it most. USC in the Coliseum, interception. Penn State semifinals, interception. USC, Notre Dame Stadium, interception. No matter what, the ups and downs, Christian Gray always stirring something up. But when you need him, he's got your back. He's always there. It's whose car you're going to take. You might not like everything that he does, but he keeps battling, and he is always there for you when you need him. And you're like, see, Mom, that's why Christian Gray is my friend. So what do you think, Christian Gray?
Yeah, I like that analogy. I've gone back and forth on this because I'm in some group chats and they're always like, man, Christian Gray, all he does is get toasted. He's always seeming to get burned in coverage. He's always giving a big play. But, I think the thing I admire the most about Christian Gray is no matter how hard you punch him, he always comes punching back just as hard.
Yeah.
And the thing is, too, he might give up some plays, during the course of a game. But when the moment is the biggest and you need him the most, he shows up. He's the reason why you went on to a national championship against Ohio State. He's the reason why you even made the college football playoff last season with his interception to seal the USC game. Mm-hmm. He's a big reason why Notre Dame still has a chance at the college football playoff this season, making a big-time interception, making some big plays on defense down the stretch. And I think the analogy, I liked your analogy. I think I'm going to go a different route with mine. He's kind of like, the little brother that always gets picked on, right? Like you're never going to miss with Big Brother. You got Leonard Moore, All-American on the other side. You know what he is. He's one of the best corners in the country.
Right.
So if you're an offense and you're game planning, you're not going to attack Leonard Moore. That's just not what you're going to do. You might try to get some, against him here and there, but you got to throw the ball against someone, right? And Christian Gray has the misfortune of playing opposite of Leonard Moore, because you're not going to throw it at Leonard Moore and you're going to pick on the guy who's a little bit undersized as a corner.
Yes.
And that just happens to be him. And so week in and week out, he gets the toughest matchups. Other teams are game planning to try to take advantage of him because they're not going to go after Leonard Moore. They're not going to go after a Don Schuler. And with the emergence of Tate Johnson and his athletic ability in the secondary, you're really not going to go after him either. So who does that leave? That leaves Christian Gray. And so, I'm not up here trying to make excuses for the guy, but he's consistently the guy that gets picked on game in and game out by the best wide receivers with the best game plans. And yeah, he's going to give up some plays. That's just the nature of playing cornerback. You got to have the memory of a goldfish. You just got to move on to the next play, right? And so I think playing cornerback has to be the hardest position because you can get absolutely toasted the next play or one play, and then the next play you can make an interception and be a game changer.
And you know what? People were tweeting stuff and blasting him on social media during the game and everything else. And you've got national reporters at the game talking about get Christian Gray off the field and all this different stuff. But they did that zoom in of Christian Gray when he was sitting there on the sideline, and that's kind of made the rounds a little bit. Christian Gray wasn't hanging his head. He wasn't sitting there pouting. He was
getting mad.
He was ticked off. He was pissed off is what he was. He was like David Banner, Incredible Hulk. It's like, here comes Hulk time. Like he was getting mad, and he went out there and he let his play show it. But you're right. And Indy Forever 72 says it as well. He gets thrown at a lot because of Moore on the other side. The other team's not just going to stop throwing the ball because Leonard Moore is out there. The ball's got to go somewhere. And if you've got Leonard Moore on one guy, and you've got a great matchup between Leonard Moore and Mekhi Lemon out there the other night, ball's got to go somewhere. So someone's going to get picked on. And sometimes Christian Gray gets picked on. Sometimes he doesn't succeed. But again, he's not hanging his head and he's pouting. He's getting ticked off, and he keeps battling, and he keeps battling, and he keeps making plays. So for that, I've got to give him a stock up for his play, even though there were some plays that were, ugly and, he'd like to take back and nobody wants to see. He still makes a big play in a big-time moment of the game. So I got to give him
I mean, you got to realize Notre Dame's defense freaking, held USC under 100 rushing yards. They weren't going to run the ball. All they could do is throw the ball. And that's 2 years in a row where all they wanted to do was throw the ball. It's a really good offense with a really good quarterback, with a really good, offensive-minded head coach. The ball is going to be thrown around. And also, I think you got to look at this big picture as well. I think this does nothing but help Christian Gray for his chances beyond college football. Like, he's going to be one of the more battle-tested corners going into the NFL because of how much, teams want to throw at him when Leonard Moore's on the opposite side.
Exactly. By the way, Salty wants to know where in the darkest corners of my crooked mind my analogies come from. It's just, you don't want to know. They just show up. I'm just sitting there and I start thinking about Christian Gray, and stuff like this pops into my head. It's either the blessing or the curse of being exposed to too much media from a very young age. I was raised on television. What can I say? It is what it is at this point. By the way, Joe popping in. Haven't seen old Joe in a little while. He said he spent the night in the ER. Hope you're doing better. At least your thumbs are working right now. So hopefully you are feeling better, Joe, and always glad to have you in the show. How about Chris Ash's defense? They held Southern Cal to nearly half of its scoring average. Has Chris Ash's stock ever been as high as it is right now?
No, I think his stock is sky high. I think this is the best string of performances that he's put together. And I think it all started with that Arkansas game. You see a lot of, I don't know the exact numbers. I wish I did, but you see Arkansas against Ole Miss, Arkansas against some of these other opponents, and they're just rattling off points. Yeah, their defense has been crappy, but they've still been scoring a lot of points. It started there. They held that Arkansas team in check. They started creating the turnovers against Boise State. And then, that carried over into NC State and now into USC. I love the biggest takeaways I had from the USC game is you held USC under 100 yards where you knew establishing a run game was very important, right? Like Notre Dame obviously did that. They rushed for over 300 yards. They dominated the line of scrimmage. USC wanted to do that. That would have made their life a lot easier, especially in a game where it's raining buckets the entire time.
Yeah.
that was huge. Holding them under 100 yards, making them have to, throw the ball in wet conditions, catch the ball in wet conditions, all of that. And then the turnovers. That's been the biggest thing. They're now creating turnovers and creating more opportunities for the offense. And I think that's the biggest thing as you go, later into the season and potentially into college football playoff matchups. You need a defense that can obviously get stops, but you got to create turnovers as well. And so I've been really, really impressed with their ability to now start creating turnovers as well.
I agree. And to your point about Arkansas, and look, I'll help you out a little bit with the numbers. Southern Cal, Arkansas, and Boise State are all in the top 20 right now in scoring offense. They all average at least 36.9 points a game. Those three teams, USC, Arkansas, Boise State, top 20 scoring offense in the nation today, they combined to score a total of 44 points against Notre Dame. So I'm looking for a couple of numbers here. And there it is, 4. Like Joe asks in the YouTube chat, are you sure it wasn't the rain that helped Ash? Well, Mayava still threw for a pretty decent amount of yards. He still threw for over 300 yards. Now his completion percentage wasn't that great, but when I watched that performance, I don't think it had nearly as much to do with the rain. If anything, I think you can argue that the rain probably had a greater impact on CJ Carr. And we'll talk more about Carr in a little bit, but I don't think it go back and again, look at the track record. It wasn't just USC. There's a track record of 4 games now, USC, Arkansas, Boise State, NC State, all teams that have been held well below their scoring averages against Notre Dame and this defense. So if it was a one-off thing, okay, yeah, it was raining out there, but I don't think it was the rain that nearly had as much to do with Notre Dame's defense and how they impacted them. They had 6 hurries. They had a handful of sacks. They had 4 pass breakups to go along with the interceptions as well, So
I mean, again, if USC was worried about it, they should have run the ball better.
Yeah, but they didn't. And that's the other thing. They had 68 rushing yards and 2.3 per carry. They came into the game averaging 6.5 yards a carry and over 225 rushing yards per game. They were held to less than a third of their rushing total. That didn't have anything to do with the rain. That had to do with Notre Dame just teeing off on their run.
And Notre Dame's best run stopper was out.
Yeah, Gabe Rubio. I had to think of. I was first. My first thought was linebackers, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Defensive lineman Gabe Rubio was out. Salty wants to know: would you say that Chris A has risen from the ashes?
He's emerging.
I don't think his stock has been as high as it is right now since probably he left Ohio State to become the head coach at Rutgers. I think that where it is right now, obviously it has not been high at all this season, with the way things started here at Notre Dame, and he justifiably took a lot of criticism for how things looked. But I think it's been that long since he helped Ohio State win a national championship as defensive coordinator and went on to Rutgers. I think that's how long it's been since Chris Ash's stock is as high as it is presently. We'll take a timeout. When we come back, we'll get into CJ Carr, what we do with him on Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down Day, as well as some other Shamrocks Up and Shamrocks Down. Not a lot of downs this week. There were a couple, though. I'll be curious to see if you have any. I definitely have a couple on my list, though. We'll do that with Jesse Steyers, Sean Steyers, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com continues. It's Shamrock Up, Shamrock Down Day, our weekly stock check of Notre Dame football with Jesse Stiers. I am Sean Stiers. What do we do with C.J. Carr, Jess? It was not C.J. Carr's best game. You know, we a couple of weeks ago talked about how Boise State was probably his worst game. This one trumped that one, unfortunately. So what do we do with C.J. Carr?
I don't think you stock down him. He's winning football games and leading Notre Dame, playing quarterback for Notre Dame at a very high level. You still have to realize he's young. And I would take these kind of growing pains over other growing pains. I think it could be a lot worse. I know he obviously has Jeremiah Love around him, Jadarian Price around him, a good offensive line, so that helps. But again, like I would, and I saw someone say it in the chat, like I wouldn't mind doubling down on CJ Carr because I know he's a competitor, and I know he's going to continue to come back, and when the team needs him, he's going to step up. So again, if his worst performance is USC and they beat USC at home, a ranked opponent in a very high intense rivalry game, then I'll take that. So I'm definitely not saying stop down at the end of the day.
I would agree. Stymie, by the way, in the YouTube chat asking, says he's late, just got home. Is it another 45-minute show tonight, or do we get to dive into a couple of things? Yes, we'll be diving into a couple of things. This is a full, luxurious 2-hour show tonight. So we will be here until 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight, and then the Wake Up the Echo show comes on after that. So you got plenty to look forward to tonight. I think C.J. Carr maybe seeing a little bit of ghosts. Like, remember the breakdown Nick Saban did on College Game Day the other day? You were the one who actually told me about this, and then I went back and looked at it. He was, all talking about the zone blitzes and the stuff that he thought USC was going to throw at Carr. They obviously made the very curious decision to ignore Notre Dame's running game and focus on trying to shut down the passing game in C.J. Carr. So I think that he maybe was in his head a little bit too much, thinking about what he, like, are they going to do this instead of just reacting to what he was actually seeing? One of the few times, and like to some extent, Boise State with all the different pressures and stuff like that they bring, they impacted him. Not quite to this extent, but USC's not a great defensive team, but D'Anton Lynn is a good defensive coordinator. They're a better defensive team now than when they hired him a couple of years ago. So I think that, maybe there was just some of that. Like when you watch the way CJ played, obviously the interception was the worst of the worst. That's just a case. Throw the ball away, 5 defenders, 2 receivers, throw the ball away, throw it out of bounds, live to play another play. Either you're going to go for it or you're going to kick the field goal in that case.
Yeah, and I think that interception is even more kind of frustrating because the week before against NC State, he threw an almost identical one in the goal line, rolling out, trying to extend a play, ends up throwing an interception. That would be my biggest knock. But here's the thing. NC State put an extra guy in the box because they were afraid of the run game. What did CJ Carr do? He lit them up in the passing game.
Right.
USC decided that they wanted to go lighter in the box and force CJ Carr to throw, and Notre Dame shredded them in the running game. So really, I think you have to be overall impressed with this offensive unit as a whole because there's really no answer defensively. If you want to put an extra guy in the box, CJ Carr has shown that he can light you up in the passing game. If you want to make the stupid mistake that USC did and put an extra guy in coverage in a rainy game and then just get run all over for 300 yards, like I think CJ Carr could have just done maybe more to be even more kind of simple and just really relied on that running game. But again, I have nothing wrong with what he's done so far.
No,
and I'm just overall impressed with the offense because, again, what are you going to do? Are you going to put an extra guy in the box? Are you going to put an extra guy in coverage? Either way, you're going to get tore up.
And that's ultimately what's going to make Notre Dame even more dangerous, especially with the schedule that they've got the rest of the way, because now their number one objective is obviously winning every week, but also getting a little bit better every week as they build toward another college football playoff run, because they're like, after seeing what they did, going back to the defense and everything else, like after seeing the way that offense performed, the way they needed to, for the most part, take what the defense is giving you. That's what they did. And they easily could have run for close to 500 yards if they would have wanted to with that game plan that USC had. But that's the double-edged sword that teams are going to face now, because they have a quarterback who can legitimately stretch the field and is also very accurate. And those two running backs, they're going to put you in some quandaries going forward. They're going to make you pay the price one way or the other.
I saw something, just kind of speaking on CJ Carr here. I watched Marcus Freeman was on Bustin' with the Boys. That's with Will Compton and Taylor Llewellyn. I don't know if you saw that interview, but there was some funny stuff in there. They talked about CJ Carr versus Miami, and Marcus Freeman basically coming into halftime and telling his offensive staff, we just need to cut CJ Carr loose. Like, they were very conservative with him. He admitted that they were conservative with him in the first half against Miami. And I don't think we all likely knew that, right? But I don't think I ever heard Marcus Freeman actually verbalize it and put it out there. I mean, does that frustrate you anymore?
National guys get all the good quotes.
Does that frustrate you? Because it's like, I get it on one hand, it's his first game on the road against Miami, but you can say that's what cost them the game, is they were just so vanilla in the first half.
Too conservative in the first half. Yeah.
It's like, who CJ Carr is. Why did you limit him?
I think that because of the training camp that they had, with more turnovers, more interceptions than they would have liked to have seen, and the fact that quarterback competition basically went until like a week and a half before the Miami game kicked off, I think that is in their head. So they put together this game plan that was like, we can't have fatal flaws on the road, ranked team, all this different stuff, first start, all those different. So I understand it doesn't frustrate me. I mean, I think that ultimately they're going to be better for it. It's a learning lesson all the way around. There's not much you can do now. I understand where their mindset was, because again, they saw day in and day out what was going on with him, and ultimately why they felt like they needed to protect him in that situation.
Yeah, it's just tough. It's a double-edged sword, but at the end of the day, if you're playing to lose, then what's the whole point,
Oh,
It's
come on. Eddie Downer, first day back.
I also need I want to sneak in my own Shamrock down, Shamrock up question. So build in a little time for that.
Do you want to do it now, or do you want to wait?
I don't know, and this might be, you might get mad at me because I don't know what you and Vince talked about yesterday, but
oh boy,
yesterday was my first day back at work, and after work I didn't want to do anything but just kind of be a vegetable. So were you Shamrock up or Shamrock down on the Jeremiah Love celebration?
Oh man, I know where old man Vince stands on this. I'll just say, because I did see that's actually the part someone shared that clip from the Bussin' with the Boys of Marcus Freeman. That's
about how his kids saw it.
Yeah, apparently his kids saw it. And his wife called him, and she's like, "What's going on here?" And it's like,
well, his kids were doing it.
Seen it. Yeah, not the best look. I don't know exactly what that's supposed to be. Not the best look. So Joe Allen says he liked it. I think I'll just have to go down on that particular celebration. You're at Notre Dame. You can't do that.
So that's where I'm having a really hard time, because you are an influential player, right? Like, a lot of people look up to you. You're in college. A lot more younger people are looking up to you. You play for Notre Dame, obviously a very prestigious religious university. But at the same time, if you drop 250 yards on someone, I still think you should be able to hit a little celebration.
Celebration's one thing. Dry hump in the end zone, that's I mean, there's really no other way to describe it.
Oh. I think it's a funny talking point.
Yeah, it's something. It's something.
Well, then
go ahead.
Freeman also said he has clips that he shows his team every week called the Wiseman clips of things that you do good and bad. And he said this one is definitely going to be on the Wiseman clips this week.
Yeah. I didn't see it until it started going around on social media. I never noticed him doing it actually in live time at the game. So,
Oh man, I know Swangdong was probably a fan of it.
yeah, I'm sure he was. Intersectional rivalries. Shamrock up, Shamrock down.
Big Shamrock up. I think, when you start thinking about some of the best intersectional rivalries, who come to mind? Obviously, Notre Dame and USC. Notre Dame and Michigan were probably on that list when they were a consistent rivalry. Now probably Florida, Florida State, maybe Georgia, Georgia Tech, like that. Those are some of the other teams you get in there. I just love rivalries in general. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be intersectional or sectional or whatever it is. I think rivalries are a great part of the game. And I can't remember what game I was watching on Saturday. I'm really mad I forgot this. But whoever was doing it might have even been the Notre Dame game. They were talking about the top 6 rivalries in all of college football that just, no matter what happens, you can't take those away.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot. And so I think that might be a fun question for later in the week is, who would be your top 6? What would your list look like?
Top 6 rivalries never go away. Okay.
Never go away.
We'll put
no matter how much college football changes and conferences change, you got to keep a core group of rivalries because that's what defines college football. There's so much history.
I wonder if Texas and Texas A&M, probably much like Notre Dame and Southern Cal, depending on which side you ask, the fact that rivalry is back after going away, like they didn't play. When Texas A&M went to the SEC, what's that been, 13, 14 years ago, when Texas A&M made that move. Texas A&M was tired of Texas, so they made their move, and now they've got Texas again, and they're playing all the time right now. But I wonder if even the Texas A&M people are happy that it's back now, that they get that rivalry, especially since both teams are pretty good right now.
Yep. I can remember 4 of them off the top of my head. It was Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, Army, Navy, and I can't remember the last 2. Who was on this person's list of the top 6?
Okay. Save it for tomorrow.
All right.
We'll give ours tomorrow. We might even have to go as far as 10 just to stretch it all the way. There's some good ones. Florida State, Miami. That's another really good one. I do find it curious, the subject of intersectional. Of course, we're talking about Notre Dame and Southern Cal predominantly, that USC athletic director Jen Cohen now has the LA Times carrying her water to try to convince everyone.
I read that horrible article that was posted yesterday.
All the time. Fortunately, I didn't click on it, but I saw the summaries that everyone was given. And from what I understand, it neglects the fact that Notre Dame and USC have now played 96 times over the last 100 years, while Notre Dame and Michigan have played just 44 times ever, even though they began playing, something like 40 years before Notre Dame and USC started playing. They first played, Notre Dame and Michigan, in 1887. They've only played 44 times, but everyone acts like that was an annual series. Notre Dame and USC are rivals for a reason, because they were playing each other every year. Notre Dame and Michigan were intermittent at best. They went from 1909 to 1942 without ever playing. And then after 1943, they didn't play again until 1978. There have been long breaks in the series in the past. Not to mention the fact, I don't think they mentioned, they're trying to blame it on Notre Dame for going to the move to the ACC and all that stuff. Well, the Big Ten expanded, the Big Ten expanded, and that meant Michigan also had to change its scheduling philosophy. So it's not all on Notre Dame. It's just a bunch of bunk is what it is. All right, let's take our final timeout this hour. We've got to hit some more Shamrock up, Shamrock downs for Notre Dame, because there was a lot of good, just a little bit of bad. We'll do that when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue through this 5 o'clock hour. Full hour in the second hour of the show tonight. Rapid fire. Tons of topics. We're going to get more into the Notre Dame USC rivalry that we didn't get to touch on yesterday because we had so much stuff going on. Shamrock up, Shamrock down day. Jesse, whose stock rose the most, do you think, for Notre Dame coming out of USC? Or do you just have a list? Like, do you have some Shamrock up guys that you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big Shamrock up has to be Auding, the center. I think he stepped in a big time role.
Yeah.
Didn't, I obviously I told you.
Funny you led with that when I asked you who's rose the most, because he is my rose the most guy to come from off the bench to not just starting, but dominating in the middle of the offensive line against SC's defensive line.
Yeah, and we'll get into this more in rapid fire, but losing someone like Billy Strouth is obviously going to be a blow. But I would say my biggest compliment I can give Joe Rudolph from last season and this season is they've had a great deal of injuries among the offensive line, and you simply just wouldn't know it. Like, they have so many guys who plug and play on the offensive line, and everyone wants to, I think, rain on Rudolph as much as possible and say, why are we starting this guy or that guy, and point out the deficiencies of this guy and that guy. But every time someone gets hurt and they're in a big game, you're like, well, this could really come to bite us. It never does. It never does. Yeah. And I think that's something very admirable to say about Joe Rudolph and his entire offensive line unit. So I have to go stock up for him. I know this is like, it might be hard to say, or everyone's like, oh yeah, duh. Jeremiah Love.
Just a second. Joe's asking about an update on Billy Strouth. We're going to do that in rapid fire. So we've got only so much time right now for the rest of the Shamrock up, Shamrock down. We will get into the Billy Strouth in rapid fire, though. Go ahead.
I think Jeremiah Love, as easy it is to say, you got to say, I think his stock up is trending so much that he's actually entering Heisman conversations.
He might be now. Like you're hearing these last couple of weeks, you're hearing more of that. And a game like Saturday night, primetime game against USC, the whole thing, he just had the most yards, the most rushing yards by anyone in the history of Notre Dame Stadium. Anyone in the history of a stadium that has been around for 95 years. That's what Jeremiah Love did Saturday. He's the Doak Walker National Running Back of the Week. Jadarian Price, by the way, the Paul Hornung National Player of the Week. Notre Dame dominated these awards this week.
And I don't know if you and Vince talked about this yesterday, but Jeremiah Love being second team All-American midseason is criminal. Absolutely criminal.
I know.
They put the Michigan back and they put Missouri's back ahead of him.
Oh, you mean two guys that no one's ever heard of before?
You look them up, and
you guys are going to go behind Jeremiah Love when the draft happens next year. Right. Those two guys.
And speaking of the draft, I texted you this weekend. This is going to make a lot of people mad, so plug your ears. But the Dallas offense, if they drafted Jeremiah Love with that first-round pick, they need so much help on defense, but I don't care. I don't care if they use that first-round pick on Jeremiah Love.
Jesse's like a teenager getting ready for a first date when he thinks about Jeremiah Love in that offense, man.
Man, I would just – they're already so good, and then you add him. He's like Bijan Robinson 2.0.
I don't disagree, but we can't get sidetracked here unless you want everyone coming after you.
That's true. Let me move to the defensive side of the ball. Those are my only two.
Let me mention one that I don't think you're going to mention. James Rendell, the punter. Ray Guy punter.
He did pin them deep a few times.
He punted. Here are the numbers that I didn't even realize until this release came out and Notre Dame broke it all down. 4 punts. He averaged 49 yards per punt. That's insane. 3 of them came down inside the 20-yard line, including a long punt of 55 yards. That was his longest one.
In the rain.
3 of Rendell's 4 punts led to USC drives that ended with no points, None of his punts allowed a chance at a return. And he also pinned the Trojans at an average of the 17.25 yard marker on his punts. 3 of the punts were down inside the 20. He averaged a placement of the 13 1/3 yard line. He is currently, Notre Dame as a team ranks 11th in the nation in net punting. So big ups to James Rendell, a guy who we always knew had the leg, had the talent, and it like we're not talking about the punts nearly as much this year because let's be honest, Notre Dame hasn't had to punt as much this year. But when you get production like that, that's called just letting him do his thing and not worrying about these Australian rules and, all this different crazy stuff, the rugby style or whatever else punting that he was doing so much of last year. Go ahead. Who are your other ups?
So I got to move to the defensive side of the ball. I think the secondary is a wash. I thought Tay Johnson made a really nice play in goal line where he closed the gap on Mayava and forced him. Like it looked like he was going to run the ball in. He had great closing speed, forced him to throw the ball out of bounds. He could have ran that ball in had he not been there. But I've been really impressed with KVA and Snead the last few games. I think that they have been just absolutely like I love seeing Snead. Just it seems like everything is finally clicking for the guy, and I just think KVA is just a beast. Like he is just shaping his all-around game of pass coverage, run coverage, being able to rush off the edge, and I think it was the 4th and inches play where Lincoln Riley just can't help himself, but he does a bootleg and tries to throw the ball.
Insane.
And KVA just stuck on his man in coverage.
Yep.
And I believe Snead was the guy who ran at the quarterback and forced the play. So on that play alone, I'm talking about those two guys. And I tell you every time, the number one thing that pisses me off is when a quarterback does a sprint out, the linebacker has to shoot immediately because you either tackle him for a loss or make him make a bad throw. And that's exactly what Snead did. And it just – those linebackers are so well coached and trained now, and we're starting to see it finally in Game 6 and Game 7. It's just amazing. So, yeah, those would be my two guys defensively for stock up.
I like that. I like both of those. Snead was on my list. I'd kind of forgotten about Kingston Viliamu Asa, but definitely he needs to be in there as well. And then the safeties, Tay Johnson and Adon Schuler. They combined for 18 tackles. They were the top 2 tacklers. And USC puts in their running quarterback. They tried to have him run that play to the right, and Tay Johnson just came shooting out of nowhere and snuffed him out and made the stop. And Adon Schuler was great in run support as well. They were both just huge, and kind of like what you're talking about with the linebackers as well. Those like their natural feel, their instinct finally feels like it's showing up again. We're seeing so many more instinctual plays across the board, and it does appear to coincide with the fact that they're doing a lot of stuff that they were doing last year.
I got to sneak in another one. Big Shamrock up for Jason Onye in Rubio's absence. I thought he was tremendous. Obviously, we talked about USC not having over 100 rushing yards. I think him and also Elijah Hughes, again, I'd give him another stock up guy, guys along the defensive line who just got it done. So
and against his old team to boot.
Yes. So defensively, and I like the ones you said too. I think Tay Johnson had some plays that kind of went. He had some good ones and some bad ones, but I wouldn't mind going Shamrock up on Adon Schuler. I thought he was great all night, and then obviously when he forced that turnover, that's a huge momentum changer in the game.
My only Shamrocks down for this game are the kickers. Noah Burnett missed an extra point and a 31-yard field goal, which is barely more than an extra point. Basically, you just can't miss a chip shot field goal. I don't care if it's raining, the whole thing. It's a close game. USC's kicker made all of his kicks, and he made a couple field goals from longer out than what Burnett was asked to do. I realize he's injured. Maybe this week of rest can help him out. They've got to get that figured out, though.
We've talked about this before. If you want to be a legit playoff team, you got to have a field goal kicker. One of these games is going to come down to whether or not your field goal kicker can make a kick, in a high leverage situation. I mean, it was Penn State last year to go on to the national championship. It's probably their biggest weakness overall right now is outside of punting, their kicking game.
Yeah, and then Eric Schmidt, who's handling the kickoffs because he's got the big healthy leg, and Burnett has had the hip injury, so Schmidt's doing the kickoffs. He kicks 2 out of bounds. Again, you can't let the other team – again, I know it's raining and all that stuff, but, again, USC's kickers weren't kicking them out of bounds. But, fortunately, he kicks it out of bounds twice. You give him the ball at the 35-yard line. Fortunately, Notre Dame's defense came to play. They held him to a grand total of 3 points on those 2 drives after he kicked it out of bounds. But that's my only Shamrock down. Do you have any downs for the game?
Not specifically, like.
Okay. Which stock is higher, Canary Islands, Paris, or Bordeaux?
So this is a hard question. Paris is what it is. It's the Eiffel Tower. It's the touristy. The thing is, in that city, it's just you're always crowded.
Did you guys go to the Louvre, by the way? Did you go to the Louvre?
No, we went by it. We did like this dinner cruise on that river, and we saw all of like the museums and the Notre Dame and all that stuff. But
uncultured Clevelanders. Okay.
We only had 2 days in Paris, so we were kind of trying to make the most of it. But as I was saying, crowded, always smells of cigarettes or cologne, really strong cologne and perfume. I would say in general it came down to the Canary Islands and Bordeaux, but I would have to say Bordeaux because we've done something like the Canary Islands before, like a kind of like an all-inclusive resort type thing. Like it's fun, but I like exploring places we've never been before. Neither of us have been to Bordeaux. It was a lot of just kind of being on our feet, walking around, going around the city. We drank a lot of wine, and when I say a lot of wine, I mean a lot of wine. We kept all of the corks from our bottles of wine, so I'll give you a final tally. But I think in Bordeaux, we were averaging like 4 or 5 bottles a day of wine. So we were,
when in Bordeaux,
I mean, we're in like the wine capital of the world, So it's like, what are you supposed to do?
DJ brings up a good point. He says, are we allowed to give the refs
I meant to do that. That was my Shamrock down.
We did that last week. We buried them last week, and they were just as bad, if not worse, this week. So what do you want to say about the refs since I had my turn on them last week?
It's just like, I could understand like a game here or there, giving them a mulligan, but this is 3 straight home games, Boise State, NC State, Notre Dame, where it's just like, what are you even looking at, right? And I think the thing that really pisses me off about the USC game is you got all these trolls, USC trolls on Twitter, crying and whining about penalties.
I know.
And it's like, do you realize in the box score, your team only had 1 penalty called on them the entire game?
Notre Dame had 8.
8, right? And so it's like, if there's any team that could sit up there and complain about penalties, it's Notre Dame. The Texas A&M game would be a win for Notre Dame had they gotten that blatant holding call at the end of the game. I just think it's a mark of a weak program when you want to sit up there and talk about penalties. Like penalties, there's penalties missed on both sides every single game, right? But when your team only got called 1 penalty in a rain game, you're going to sit up there and complain about penalties? Come on.
You can't. You have no ground to stand on. In that case, I realize that, they were showing all these different clips. See, he was holding here. They were holding there, all this different stuff. But again, look at the box score. Your team got 1 penalty for 5 yards. Notre Dame had 8 penalties for almost 100 yards. Like, you got the benefit of the doubt most of the night. You're not going to get every call. That's just not the way it works. So, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. Tom wants to know if you went to the Notre Dame Cathedral.
Did not go in it, but we went by it.
Okay. We did. Did you do the bus tour thing?
It was like a river tour.
Oh, you did the river? Okay. Well, I knew you did that. I didn't know if you did the bus tour also, because it takes you by all the, the touristy sites, basically.
I will say, though, our week in France, and this is no exaggeration, we were averaging like 20,000 steps a day.
I don't doubt it. Not at all.
It's nice that, that lifestyle is kind of nice. You just get up and walk everywhere. And people wonder why Europeans, like, they eat all that butter and bread and pasta, but they freaking walk everywhere. There's not a lot of people drive cars.
Less chemicals in the food tend to help as well.
And that's what we noticed too, is like we would eat these dinners, right? And it's not like we'd be getting, heavy pasta or anything, but we'd get like fish and some apps and, drink wine, and we would never feel like bloated. Like sometimes when you eat a big meal here, it's like, oh, how am I going to get home? But it's just like, you never felt like that. And then the more we thought about it, we're like, oh, that's right. We put all this crap in our food.
Christopher says, got to see Notre Dame when you're in Paris. We went, I was like you, we went by there. They were still working on it though 2 years ago when we were over there. So yeah. They're all done with that now. Okay, that's hour number 1. Shamrock up, Shamrock down. Hour 2 coming up. Rapid fire, tons of stuff we're going to talk about. The future of the Notre Dame USC series, the unfortunate injury to Billy Schrouth and where Notre Dame goes now. That is all coming up. Hour 2, rapid fire. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.
This is Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com on Sports Radio, WSBT.
And it is hour 2 of the show, along with Jesse Stiers, Sean Stiers. You know what hour 2 means, Jesse. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire, and I have to make a disclaimer here.
Uh-oh.
Don't take this as a knock. I think this is a tremendous lineup for rapid fire today.
Okay.
But I think you've fallen a little into the trap of our audience here because
which is
a little disappointed there's no World Series question in here. There's no
I thought about
NBA
that after the
tip-off
fact.
question for today.
I think you're right about that. I do need to think about other things going on. Let's get a couple Notre Dame questions, and we'll work the World Series in here because the World Series is now set. We can't forget about the World Series. You're absolutely right. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Nicole Auerbach reported on NBC that both USC and Notre Dame are working hard to finalize an extension of the rivalry for the 2026 and 2027 seasons. And she says they're hopeful to get it done. The sticking point appears to be USC wants to play the game before Big Ten play in weeks 0 through 3. Notre Dame, no shock, wants it later in the year.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging. And that's, I think, the best thing that you can say about this scenario right now is there hasn't been a lot of encouragement of recent. You've seen the Notre Dame athletic director and head coach talk about it on the Dan Patrick show this past week when Dan Patrick was in town. And I thought it was great that, Dan Patrick will ask you the hard questions. It's not just coming on and hitting your layups and, moving on to the next one. They're going to hit you with some hard questions. So,
yeah,
I just think it's encouraging that both sides are actively working on it hard. But, it's a little discouraging because of all of the false kind of narratives that are swirling around it now, right? And it seems like, both sides want to point fingers, and I get it. That's usually what happens. But where can we meet in a middle ground? Where can we meet that both sides can feel comfortable, right? Because if you're Notre Dame, a lot of the time their schedule has those tough, what you would call non-conference, non-ACC games early in the season. Like they're loaded up with SEC opponents. They've got some Big Ten opponents on that, front of the schedule. And then if you're USC, you don't want to play a juggernaut like Notre Dame right smack dab in the middle of your Big Ten schedule, right? So I get it, but there's got to be a common ground. And I think there has to be a common ground because there's more things more important than, like this game means more to college football, I think, than it does. Like it has a bigger picture impact than just what it means for Notre Dame and USC. Like we talked earlier about how there were certain rivalries you have to keep no matter what to uphold kind of the tradition of college football.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's what we're working with here. Like everyone wants to argue about who the game means more to, Notre Dame or USC. It means the most to college football. And I think that's what that both sides need to really kind of consider when getting this deal done.
Especially, and again, like if you're sitting on the USC side, you've got a whole, a whole list of demands and a whole list of grievances from the other side. Same with Notre Dame looking the other way. And if the sticking point is when the game is going to be played, now to me, that shouldn't be that big a deal. Now, I do understand that if you're Notre Dame, you do have some years where you've already got these games set early in the season. And is it like, well, is it to our advantage to be loading another game at the front of the schedule, a big rivalry game at the front of the schedule? Like if you could rearrange some of those other ones. But again, everyone wants to try to have their non-conference games played up front so that, you don't get into that unless you're the SEC, of course. And then in November, you've got Cupcake Week and we're all playing.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I was looking at some of these SEC schedules and I was like, oh, they're playing Citadel in 2 weeks.
Right. And Mercer and whoever else. I would not be surprised, though, with all this back and forth about when the game is going to be played. Notre Dame likes the fact that the game, when it's in LA, it's Thanksgiving weekend. They get to go to Southern California. They've been going to Southern California for decades. Thanksgiving weekend, playing in the LA Coliseum. And in the alternating years, they've played in Northern California at Stanford. Well, both of those even, are in question now in terms of if there's going to be any trip to the West Coast for Notre Dame. I would not be surprised if Chad Bowden is involved in them really putting their foot down more firmly about not wanting to play Thanksgiving weekend because it benefits Notre Dame so much.
He now knows the other side of
he's been here. He knows what Notre Dame thinks of the that recruiting opportunity to get out there Thanksgiving weekend. Now, like the recruiting calendar has changed, so it's a non-contact period now. So it's not like just a few years ago where the coaches could stay on the West Coast and go talk to, players and stuff like that. But still, just being in Southern California Thanksgiving weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if Chad Bowden has even more involvement in saying, no, we're going to plant our flag here. That's not going to happen. We don't want to give Notre Dame any benefits when it comes to recruiting, and that they consider that a big benefit. So we don't want to do that.
You want to know what my hypothesis is on how this whole thing ends?
Sure.
I think they play at a neutral
today.
I think they end up playing at a neutral site every year.
I don't think they're going to do that every year. That would it be the worst thing in the world if that turned out to be like a Shamrock series?
That's what I think. That's what it basically turns into. You play at a big venue, and the venue is rotating every year. Maybe it's West Coast one year, more in Notre Dame's neighborhood the next year.
Yeah.
That's just
for them to cut down on their travel and everything.
Yeah. And we'll make more out of it. I mean, they wanted to put the game on Netflix, right? Like,
yeah. Well, USC did until they found out, oh, by the way, you're actually, you remember when you decided to come to the Big Ten because Fox was going to give you all this TV money? Well, you're actually tied to that Fox TV contract. Like, you can't just schedule your own games and go out and sign. You're not Notre Dame, so you don't get to go out and sign your own TV contracts with whoever you want to. Sorry about that. You want that? Become an independent. Oh, that becomes a completely different argument in that case. But the 2026 and 27 seasons, like when you look at those, Wisconsin, Rice, and Michigan State are currently the first 3 weeks of the season for Notre Dame. So they could potentially play week 0 in LA or Vegas or Mexico City or wherever Southern Cal decides they can make the most money off it, since, that is obviously part of their deal. Like that would be comfortable next year if they played in week 0. 2027, as of right now, it's Purdue on September 4th, at Michigan State September 18th, and then you've got openings the 11th of September and the 25th of September. So that seems fairly accommodating as well in terms of SC coming here in September, if that's what they want to do. So it feels like the next 2 years, they should be able to figure something out if they really want to. And the game needs to be played at the front of the schedule like USC is asking for or demanding or whatever it is they're doing right now. By the way, these are words that Heather Dinich wrote the other day, and I'm sure a lot of people saw these, but this pertains to this. Heather Dinich said, USC has suggested it might not continue the rivalry, which has been played 96 times dating back to 1926. And definitely not just because Lincoln Riley said it was making him look bad and it'd be way more fun to play Portland State. Instead, USC feels that now that it's in the Big Ten, where it routinely gets to lose games to Illinois, Minnesota, and Maryland, there's really no need for higher profile losses out of conference. Signed, Heather Dinich. She wrote that. That was like, you talk about coming in hot, man. Big time.
Well, I mean, she's been the only one that's been bold enough to say it, like Lincoln Riley doesn't want to. Lincoln Riley is beyond scared. Like that's like he knows he's got to play a tougher conference schedule. And we got to play a team that's knocking on the college football playoff door every year. Like, who would want that? I get it on his end, but you can't end a rivalry because you bent the knee and joined the Big Ten.
Right.
So
if you're USC, you knew what you were getting into. Like, did you not ever sit down and look at a map and see where you had to travel before you decided you were going to do this? You know, like you were completely willing to take those checks. So I think it looks bad. And like, there's a comment that I heard from Petros Papadakis, and you might remember, I can't remember if it was you or Vince that was on with me this summer. We were playing some of the comments from Petros that he had where he was just
former USC guy.
Yeah, where he was a former USC player ripping USC for their whole stance on this. And he wants to see the series continue. And what Petros says, and he's a media guy, of course, he works for Fox Sports and does radio in LA. He wants to see the series continue. And he says there are plenty of alums, majority of alums, who want to see the series continue. And he doesn't like the fact that you've got a couple of carpetbaggers like Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen, the athletic director, who are ultimately the ones who are calling the shots on this. And they've, collectively been there for all of 10 minutes. And he doesn't like the fact that those two are the ones who are in charge of one of the most historic rivalries in all of college sports and the future of that rivalry. So, and I agree with him on that. And I think pretty much all Notre Dame fans would, because Notre Dame fans really, more than USC fans, it seems like, want to see this continue. But he's absolutely right. Like, who are Lincoln Riley and Jen Cohen, who are not directly tied to USC other than the fact that it's their current employer? Who are they the ones to be to pull the plug on this whole thing?
Yep.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame announced today that left guard Billy Strouth will miss the Boston College game and could be out for at least a month with an MCL injury.
Yeah, it's a massive, massive loss. You're talking about probably, one of the top draft eligible guards going into this draft. He's having what many would say is a breakout season. And he had a tremendous game against USC. He's a large reason why they just dominated the line of scrimmage and were just blowing back USC defenders all night long. And so obviously it goes without to say that it's a massive loss. But if I want to flip this and make light of the situation or find the bright spot, in my opinion, to suffer an MCL sprain and be out 3 to 4 weeks, I don't think that there's a better window in the season for this to happen, because first of all, you're going into your bye week. So that automatically gives you a week of recovery. And then after that, you play Boston College, who just lost to UConn, by the way. I don't think you necessarily absolutely need him for that game. I think you could feel it a little bit against Navy, but your guys are going to be over. Like, those guys are in the Navy. I know they're undefeated, but they still have to be in Navy shape, right? And so as long as you got 300-pound plus linemen, you should be able to handle your business against Navy, right?
You can lean on, but yeah.
I think the game that you really, really want him back for, and I think the toughest remaining game on the schedule is Pittsburgh. And so you have this week, your bye week. You got the 2 weeks with Boston College and Navy. If you can get him back by Pittsburgh, I would consider that a win. If that doesn't happen, you might as well just shut him down for the rest of the season and see what happens with your playoff chances, because I don't think you need him versus Stanford, and I don't think you absolutely need him against Syracuse. I think the one game where you might feel it a little bit is Pittsburgh. But again, if there's a window for this to happen, I really believe that this is the best window on the schedule for it to happen.
You're probably right. And, you know from experience, depending on the degree of the MCL sprain, you can come back from that. Jeremiah Love had an MCL sprain last year, and you remember he sprained it against USC. He came back, played well against Indiana. He was obviously bothered by it, during the playoffs. But an offensive lineman doesn't have to worry about a whole ton of lateral movement like a running back does. And
you're just downhill.
Yeah, that's right. It's a lot different for an offensive lineman. So it is a loss. It is a considerable loss because of the fact that Billy Strouth is your best offensive lineman this year. And I mean, now you've lost your two best offensive linemen in Strouth and Craig in back-to-back weeks. And
you still don't have Jagasol.
Yeah, that's right. And then on top of that, you don't have him. So, like, what could have been your entire interior offensive line is now out altogether. It is conceivable that maybe by December, all three of those guys are on the field, and that's your interior offensive line. Well, I guess not with Ashton Craig. That's not happening because it's an ACL. But it's at least conceivable that the two guards are back. But at the very least, you said it in the first hour when we touched on it a little bit, Jesse. If Joe Rudolph has done nothing else, it is get guys ready to go.
Yes.
In a back, like the backups, when they come in, these last 2 years under Joe Rudolph, they have been lights out because you went to a national championship game with an offensive line that was largely comprised of backup offensive linemen. You got all the way to the national championship game with those guys playing the bulk of your game and the bulk of your minutes last year. And think about this, because now it's most likely going to be Sullivan Absher coming in, whether it's left guard or right guard, wherever they decide he's better off, and Gerby Lambert. Two guys, Gerby Lambert, 6'7", 335 pounds. Sullivan had 6'8", 327 pounds. That is a lot of human that is going to be playing in the middle. Joe Otting, not quite that big at center, but he's pretty good size himself. So they're going to have some pretty big dogs playing guard for them for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to feel good about, you never feel good about injuries, but if you want to feel good about it, just again look at the track record. Notre Dame hasn't really missed a beat. Yeah, there might be a play or two, or but that's every game. You're not going to be perfect along the offensive line. It's just so impressive. And Chris Galloway is giving me a real hard time in here about stop saying it's a massive loss. It's next man up. Okay, I completely agree, but like you said, it's still their best offensive lineman. You can't say it's not some sort of loss. And then he also got on me and said, no need to bring up Jag's name, hasn't played all season. Just kind of talking about, again, how much
he's going to play at some point. He's going to play at some point.
It's important to note that 3 starters in some regard are now missing along the offensive line, and they still are running for 250 yards on Cats. It should show you how impressive this factory of offensive line is at Notre Dame. Not only that, and it goes beyond just the offensive line and Joe Rudolph. Every position at Notre Dame is too deep now. That's never been the case before. If Notre Dame lost a starting defensive tackle and their center in the same week against USC when Brian Kelly was coach, everyone would be freaking running around with their heads cut off. They
also weren't winning that game.
Right. And so this should just show you how far Notre Dame has come in terms of recruiting and being 2 deep, almost 3 deep at every position, where we can go down a guy and not feel like the world is on fire.
Ken asks, if Jags is healthy, what do you do with Gerby? Well, it also depends on if Shrouth is back and what's going on with him, and also how Absher plays. When Jagasaw comes back, they didn't just throw him right into the lineup last year. It still took a couple of injuries for Jagasaw to find himself on the field. But I think it's going to depend on how Absher and Gerby Lamberts, or Billy Shrouth, whoever is on the field at that time, it's going to depend on how they're playing and if they feel like Jagasaw gives them an upgrade at one of those positions. I think it's really going to be as simple as that, is who makes them the best, especially when by the time Jagasaw comes back, we're talking, it sounds like, even though Marcus Freeman didn't put a timeline on it, we're probably talking late November, early December again, just like last year, unfortunately. But, again, you're going to be talking about potential playoff type ramifications and what gives you the best chance to have the best offensive line possible going into the playoff. Take a break. We come back. More rapid fire. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. IrishBreakdown.com continues with Jesse Sires, fresh off his multi-continent honeymoon. I'm Sean Stiers. Glad to have you with us. Is the wife home tonight?
Yes, she's currently taking a bath.
Oh, I didn't hear any dogs barking. So that's, it's like usually when the boys get going, it's because mama's in the house. So, oh, darn it. That music got worked in there. I hope this video doesn't get flagged. I accidentally left a button pushed and the music was in there. So we'll see what happens. Probably will. I'm going to get in trouble now. ESPN announced a 6-day hold on the kickoff time for Notre Dame's November 1st game at Boston College. Do you like waiting for the kickoff time announcement, or do you like all the times being announced at the start of the season like Notre Dame does?
You know what? I'm going to say I'm indifferent. I really don't care at the end of the day. Because, I get it. They're probably not going to put this Boston College game in prime time because Boston College stinks. And they still haven't announced the Notre Dame and Pittsburgh time yet. And if Pittsburgh continues to win, it'll probably be a primetime game, right? And so, shameless plug here, I just bought my Notre Dame and Pittsburgh tickets, and I'm hoping that it's an evening game so we don't have to get up early and, do the whole thing going over to Pittsburgh. So
I think you're going to get a 3:30 kickoff for that one myself.
You think so?
That's my guess.
Better than noon, right? As long as it's like 3:30 or later, that's really all I'm worried about. But again, I don't really mind it at the end of the day. And I think largely it's because I don't go to the games. I just, when it's announced, I plan my day around it and I watch it on television, most of these games. And so it doesn't really matter what other games are going on because I'm going to watch the Notre Dame game no matter what. So again, I'm pretty indifferent on this. I don't need to know the times.
I don't need them either. Like, I don't need them to be like Notre Dame at the start of the season. I think Notre Dame does it that way, because one, you have a permanent TV partner, whereas ESPN/ABC, that's where this Notre Dame Boston College game is going to be. So you've got multiple networks involved and you got to figure out, okay, what game makes the most sense. I don't know why they need to wait another week to figure this out because BC.
Yeah, like what it is.
Like if this game is if that game doesn't kick off at noon, I would be completely shocked by that. So yeah. But I think your Pittsburgh game is going to be 3:30, and I think that Notre Dame BC will be noon. There's probably a chance that Notre Dame Pitt could even be a noon game, but I would lean toward 3:30 because at least as of right now they're both 5-2 and have stuff to play for.
I'm just excited. Get to go to my Notre Dame game this season, and I get to go. It's going to be in an NFL stadium, so I think it's kind of never been to that stadium before, surprisingly, but real excited for it.
Irish for Life says, thinks we can play a few seconds of copyrighted song legally. On the radio, we can. It's the YouTube video where the copyright stuff, where we get bitten. Like they are very, like the algorithm will check it, and I'll be shocked if by tomorrow morning we don't have a flag.
There was someone else in the chat. I don't know how to say their name, but they said, don't worry. If you get copyright struck because of the music, there's a way to mute it after the fact. So maybe you and that person can do a little.
I think Brian probably knows how, because a couple years ago I played like I think it was like the Bobby Thompson home run, like old. And I thought we'd be okay because we weren't even using video. We were just playing old radio calls from years ago. And we got flagged for that, and I know Brian Driscoll has gone back and there's some things that he can do to doctor it up. But again, I'll just kind of get barked at for screwing up the video. So, all right, in or out on a Dodgers Blue Jays World Series, Jesse?
I'm in on this. I would have been in on the Mariners as well. I wanted the Blue Jays to win because I have some good Canadian friends who I just got to see at my wedding. So that was super fun. But, two teams, when you think about World Series, you haven't heard their name come up in a while. And if my memory serves me right, Blue Jays haven't been since 93 when they won back-to-back in 92 and 93.
Joe Carter's home run. That's right.
I love me some Vlad Guerrero Jr. I think the Blue Jays are a really well-rounded team, good pitching. A lot of pop in their lineup. Bichette, Vlad, obviously Springer with the 3-run homer last night. So I'm in on it, and I just want them to beat the Dodgers, and I think that would be really good for baseball if a team like the Blue Jays or the Mariners, like I said, could go in there and beat the Dodgers. I'm also glad that the Blue Jays did it because I didn't want two West Coast teams playing in the World Series. Really not a lot of distance between the two. So now we got a true World Series. We got Toronto, you got LA, two really big markets. I think it's going to be a great World Series, and I'm going to say the Blue Jays in 6, to be honest with you.
Kind of a sneaky World Series. You're right. I don't know about the Blue Jays in 6. Like Shohei Ohtani, the way he's playing right now, might beat the Blue Jays himself. But, 3 home runs and 10 strikeouts in the same game. Like, would you have ever thought that you would see something like that? I know I never.
You know where I was watching? I was watching on my layover in Washington, D.C., in the Capital One Club with this LA fan, and we were just sitting there on this TV watching it together. I was like, no better place to watch a historical game than on a layover airport TV.
Was that when you were traveling home? That was the day it was? Man.
Yep.
I'm in on it. I like a little new blood. It's not the Yankees, so I'm
right, and that's what I mean. Like, I love that this is a new AL team that just you haven't heard of in a while.
Last summer, not this past one, but a year ago, when we went up to Niagara Falls, and then we went to see Blue Jays Red Sox up in Toronto for a day. Like, Toronto was not good. This was July. Like, to think of that team, that stadium was dead. There was zero buzz. There was zero talk. To think just a little bit more than a year later, that team is in the World Series now and doing it in the fashion that they did. It's pretty amazing, the turnaround that they've had in a short amount of time. I'm not sure if George Springer was even playing at that time, though. I think he might have been hurt last year when that was going on. But I think it's going to be a fun one. The only problem is, this is the old man in me. Brian is saying would have been nice to having all the World Series games starting in daylight. Good luck with that ever happening again, even one in daylight. But that's these late starts. That's the biggest issue with the World Series right now. Late starts. It's hard to stay up and watch it all. Will you stay up and actually watch all of these games?
I will. I'm not going to lie to you. The last 2 days I have been going to bed at like 9 p.m. in my bed, asleep by 9 p.m. It's all been finally catching up to me. We did not sleep on the honeymoon. I would be up till 2, 3 in the morning and get up at 7, 8 a.m. every morning. And then as soon as we got back, we had to go to a wedding that Saturday, and then we stayed out late because of the wedding, and then got up early on Sunday to drive back home. So it's just like finally during the work week is when I'm catching up.
Now you're
all of this sleep. But I am very much looking forward to this World Series.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that Florida became the latest school to fire its head coach after a win over Mississippi State last weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking to me that they did it, after a win. But, I guess I'm not surprised that Florida became the latest school to fire their head coach. And, a lot of these decisions, and I think, our good old friend Nick Saban kind of sound off on this earlier in the week. It's not surprising when you're at these big schools, Florida, Penn State, and you've got all this NIL money and booster money now. Like, the leash is going to be even shorter because of all the money that's involved now. So it doesn't really matter, if you're James Franklin or Billy Napier, whoever you might be. I think at the end of the day, boosters are always going to think there's someone better. And when your money is on the line and you're not seeing the reward of your money, you can easily be replaced. And that's no matter what big time program you're at. I think the leash is just getting shorter and shorter for these head coaches.
The timing is just so odd. Like, why didn't you just do it a week ago if you were going to fire him?
Right.
Like, doing it less than, just a few hours after you win a game at home. Why didn't you just do it before? Napier finishes with a 22-23 record there. They were 12-16 in SEC play, 0-10 on the road versus ranked teams. I mean, it goes on and on and on. obviously it was getting to this point, like coming into the season, they were on Billy Napier watch down there. It just felt like a matter of time, but to do it after a win is just the most weird thing. But then like there were so many, like, Billy Napier coached teams are just not well coached teams. Like, go back to the thing with the spitting that happened against USF when they lost to USF. Like, talk about not quite the final nail in the coffin, but one of the first nails this season anyway. But then that game against Mississippi State the other day, they were up by 2 points after scoring a touchdown. So they line up to go for or no, they were up by 1. Were they up by 1? Yeah, they were up by 1, I believe. And no, I can't. I'm going to mess it up now. In any case, they line up to go for 2, and then they get 12 men on the field. So they back it up, and they decide, well, we're not going to go for 2. We're going to kick it instead when the math says, hey, you still need to be going for 2. You need this 2 points. And they've got procedures. They've just got all these dumb things that always happen on Billy Napier's watch. And I think that was ultimately too much for him to overcome. But doing it after a win, again, is just bizarre.
Let me ask you this. There's been I've seen this discussion going around. This has come up with Sarkisian at Texas and Billy Napier at Florida. Do you think some of these guys are stretching themselves too thin by being head coach and offensive coordinator?
Probably so, because that was another thing with Napier. He wasn't willing to give up the play calling at Florida. And then when there are all these other things, when you've got, like you're a program plagued by dumb penalties, like procedures, not being able to count, the guys who need to be on the field. They had 10 men on the field earlier this year and a field goal, against Miami. It's like, you need to be able to sit back and not necessarily micromanage, but you need to make sure all the simple stuff is taken care of. So I think you're right. I think that there's probably something to that.
Yeah, I just feel like, you're doing too much at that point. Your job as the head coach is to be able to tap in here and there. And I think what's made me have a little bit more respect for Marcus Freeman during the Chris Ash, trouble in the beginning of the season. Everyone easily was like, well, Freeman needs to step in and become the defensive coordinator. But then what does that take away from the rest of the team? Because again, Marcus Freeman still has to, you're the highest paid man on campus, basically, right? And so you have to be the face of the program, but you also got to show up probably to meet and greets with the student body, all these different things. And I heard it was so bad with Napier that he would have, his offensive analyst scouts do everything. And then they would basically give him the call sheet, and then he would just go in and call in plays. And it's like, well, he's done zero of the research throughout the week.
He wasn't even putting together his own call sheets. Yeah.
No, he was just handed the call sheet at the end of the week and said, okay, here you go, call plays. And it's like, what sense does that make,
That's very bizarre. And now he doesn't have to worry about it anymore. Let's take our last time out. We'll back to finish up rapid fire Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Winding down Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com and Rapid Fire. Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers. Got a topic or two to get to before we finish things up here tonight. We got Wake Up the Echoes coming up in just a few minutes at 7 o'clock here on Sports Radio WSBT. Fill in the blank. Vanderbilt fans not rushing the field after beating LSU is blank.
Is maturity. I think it shows sign of maturity now that teams aren't, fans aren't just rushing the field after winning every single, ranked matchup. But to me, it's still, it shows maturity. But, we talk about what's good for college football and the integrity of college football. I always think that, I know there's all these new rules and penalties out there about whether or not you can rush the field and stuff. I think it's all crap to begin with. I think a tradition of college football, you want big student sections. You want, this big crowd at the game. You got to reward them for when they, when you take down or upset a team like LSU. So I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't rush the field. But it still shows some maturity, I guess.
But, it's like, you're not important enough for us to rush the field, Brian Kelly, LSU. Hey, we beat the team that matters last year. We beat Alabama last year. You're nothing compared to that. I thought it was hilarious that they didn't rush the field after beating LSU because it is obviously
they said we got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, bigger fish to fry, and we've already fried some of them. So you're not even important enough. How far has Brian Kelly and LSU fallen? They're not even important enough for Vanderbilt fans to rush the field after a big win. I think it's hilarious. If you're Nebraska, Penn State hires your coach, would you go after James Franklin?
Absolutely. Who are you, Nebraska? Like Penn State has been whipping you for how long now? It's like people forget what James Franklin, yes, his record against top 10 and top 5 opponents is whatever, but he handled the Big Ten, and Nebraska's in the Big Ten, right? And so if you want to win a lot of Big Ten games and still have a chance, I don't see what's wrong with that. Do a little, coach swap, and then Nebraska starts beating Penn State. That would be the cherry on top, in my opinion.
I think so as well, because that's the thing, there's the obvious connection with Matt Rule and Penn State. He was a walk-on linebacker there. I think we all know that by now. And he's got the connection to Kraft going back to their time together at Temple. So there's this obvious connection. But then, of course, Nebraska goes out and lays an egg and loses to Minnesota last week. But let's say they actually do. Well, if Matt Rule finishes with a winning season this year, it's still like, what has Matt Rule really done at Nebraska otherwise? The thing that Nebraska has still been searching for since Tom Osborne retired, and it's been a while now, is consistency. And that's what James Franklin, as much as you might not like James Franklin now, I mean, it's the same thing with Brian Kelly. Consistency is what he brought to that Penn State program, and he brought them to a very high level of winnings. After they all the sanctions that they faced after the Joe Paterno and Sandusky stuff, for him to take over that program and lead them to double-digit win seasons. I mean, you saw the thing with Nick Saban. I thought it was a little bit overboard with, the pats on the back that Nick Saban was giving James Franklin. But there are a lot of schools who would want that consistency.
That's what I mean.
Florida, as an example, they would love to have that kind of consistency.
You can't cry about winning the big games until you're consistent enough to be at the big game.
Right. Exactly. All right. Did you have something you want to get in here before we have to wrap things up? I got a couple minutes to go.
Yeah. I know not a lot of people in this chat are a fan of it, but NBA kicks off on NBC tonight. I'm pretty excited for that.
That's all you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wanted it. Like NBC basketball wasn't a thing in my kind of generation and time, and I know it used to be a big thing for a lot of your generation and other generations growing up, and just kind of I want to see like that old school NBC broadcast, and maybe they keep some of it, maybe they add some stuff to it. So whether or not you like the NBA or not, I'm just excited for this. They're entering this new kind of broadcasting, streaming era, and I'm excited to see what NBA looks like because I've heard of so many people talk about it with such nostalgia. So, yeah.
A little round ball rock. The
Yeah. Like, I want to – do you think they go with that as the intro tonight? I hope so.
Supposedly they're keeping it around. Yeah. So what time is that? And I didn't even realize that was tonight.
It's tonight, baby. 7:30.
7:30. And who's playing?
The Rockets and the Thunder. Thunder defending champions.
Okay. So is Mike Tirico calling that game as far as
I think so. I think so.
I've got an interesting something related to that topic that's going to come up, I think, on tomorrow's show in Rapid Fire. So I will save that. It's not as much. It's more about the broadcast itself than it is the NBA that I think you'll find.
Listen, we are entering the best sports era of the year. You got NFL football, college football getting into the thick of things. You got the World Series. You got the NBA tipping off. You got hockey starting. Like, whether or not you like any of those, you can't argue. This is the best sporting month ever. Every year, this is it.
All right, I got to take it over from here. Jesse, glad to have you back. Enjoy your round ball rock and your basketball tonight. We've got Notre Dame women's basketball coming up next week. We've got more Notre Dame men's basketball coming up at the end of the week. We will be back tomorrow. Looking forward to that. We will talk to you then. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Wake Up the Echoes is coming up next.